Oh, I would hope that we can get beyond our tribalism, which is so rampant now in our politics, especially. The internet has made, supposedly it was supposed to make us all more in touch with the global voice, the global perspective,
Yeah.
but it has globalized our tribalism. So, and the division between science and religion is equally toxic. So, I like to believe that these kinds of experiences that are unitive ultimately have the potential to bring us together. I think it was H.G. Wells, the science fiction writer, who said we're always in a race between education and catastrophe.
Mm.
Yeah.
Go for education, let's go for learning. And I often stress the teaching. I did not know the Zen teacher Suzuki Roshi, but he had a famous book called Beginner's Mind, and he famously said, in the beginner's mind are many possibilities. In the expert's mind are few. So
It's
the
true though.
irony, when you're a beginner and you have beginner's mind, you have the openness to ask questions, seek new information. Very often, if you're an expert, by which I mean if you see yourself as an expert, then you're a know-it-all. There's not many possibilities to know-it-all because they know everything.
Right.
So be a beginner, always be a beginner.
Hey there, beautiful souls. It's your girl, Allie, and we are back at it again for another episode of Living Life Consciously. We have a very special guest lined up for you today, and I am stoked to get started. So without further ado, Justin, say hey.
Hey, Cosmic Thrill Seekers. I'm Justin. This is Living Life Consciously, where we explore the extraordinary, ride the waves of inspiration, and embark on an adventure of limitless curiosity together. Leslie, you want to say hi?
Hi, I'm your co-host, Leslie, also known as Light Being Love, an eternal spiritual being having a temporary human experience. And I'm always very happy to be here with Keith Thompson.
Keith, can you say a quick hi?
I can. Good to be here. How are you all? Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely.
And I'm looking forward to talking with you all.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure most of our audience is probably already familiar with you, but for those that may not be, let me give a quick introduction. So join us as we dive into the extraordinary with Keith Thompson, an author, independent journalist, talk radio host, and former U.S. Senate staff member. Keith's work has graced the pages of New York Times, Esquire, and the San Francisco Chronicle, and now he's here to unravel the mysteries of the universe with us. In this intriguing episode, we'll explore Keith's most recent book, The UFO Paradox, that came out last month. Are UFO visitors from outer space, manifestations from hidden dimensions, or simply misunderstood phenomena? Keith takes us on a fascinating journey through history, linking UFOs to visionary experiences, angelic visitations, near-death experiences, and even the Celtic fairy faith. Discover how UFOs might be a blend of the physical and spiritual, capable of altering our perceptions of reality itself. Prepare to expand your mind and question everything you thought you knew about the unknown. Keith, thank you so much for being
Thank
here.
you. I love that phrase. I heard that phrase in a new way today. Unravel the mysteries. I'm not. What does it mean to ravel a mystery? And if you unravel it, I guess unravel means sort of bring it into view, right? Sort of bring it more into view. I'm certainly not necessarily going to resolve all mysteries. I don't think that's the purpose of mysteries, to be resolved. That's a rational bias we have. When we're completely in touch with things as they are, there will be no more mysteries. I'm not so sure about that.
I like that perspective.
Yeah, me too.
And that's
Definitely.
kind of synchronistic because just before we started talking with you earlier, we were watching the show Unsolved Mysteries. So
It's interesting you do a book on UFOs. I notice on Amazon has carries the book, and they have the ranking, and of course every author peaks at some point. Try not to become obsessive about it. And I guess it's the algorithms that decide which subgroups to put you in. So of course I'm in UFOs.
Okay.
I'm in metaphysical. I'm in unsolved mysteries. I'm in the occult.
Oh, okay.
So in all of those, it's a sign of where where to put this. Our categories are. I remember when the book first came out, I walked into a bookstore, and they said they did have it, and they said, did they want me to? Did they want me to? Did I want them to get it for me? I said,
Okay.
no, I'm going to try to find out where it is.
Okay.
And so I did, and I spent about 20 minutes with my friend, and it was under religion.
Oh,
Which
that's
is,
an interesting place for
yeah.
it.
Well, they didn't have a fairly small independent bookstore. They didn't have a UFO section or paranormal or mysteries. That's
Okay.
pretty understandable.
Yeah.
Could have been under human potential. Could have been under new nonfiction. But anyway, I found it, and they wanted me to sign it for them, and they put a little sticker on it saying author signed. So anyway, that's my story of a bookstore experience.
That's cool. Thank
Oh,
you for
yeah,
sharing that with
amazing.
us. I like when we get little inside secrets like that. It's cute.
Yeah, very cute.
Now, I think for our audience, I want to point out that we did a story on the UAP UFO News Show over on UAP Society YouTube channel where we covered Keith Thompson's book and how it came out, and we did a little story on it. And I just find it so amazing that here we are about 2 weeks later speaking to the man himself that wrote the book. So I just wanted to point that out and just flex a tiny little bit because I think it's cool. And last but not least, the UFO Paradox. Are you looking for a new book that examines both the physical and the spiritual sides of the UFO debate to dive into for the rest of the summer? Well, if so, look no further. A new book by author Keith Thompson called The UFO Paradox, The Celestial and Symbolic World of Unidentified Aerial Phenomena is now available for purchase. The book's back cover boasts, in case after case related to UFO encounters and other known aerial phenomena, the same impasse is reached. Testimony from witnesses on one side, dismissive responses from the authorities on the other. In the fertile void of this deadlock, however, lie extraordinary possibilities about the nature of mind and matter, spirit and soul, transforming the UFO into a celestial metaphysical event. Focusing on the possibilities found by exploring both sides of the UFO debate, veteran UFO observer and reporter Keith Thompson shares profound insights and experiences from his several decades of research, revealing that the UFO phenomenon is decidedly real, yet perhaps not what either side of the debate expects. He looks at UFOs as a genuine unknown, from outer space or manifesting from hidden dimensions, as well as the theories of skeptics and debunkers who insist that UFOs can be explained as hoaxes, hallucinations, or misidentified phenomena. He explores the modern flying saucer era against the backdrop of visionary experience, angelic visitations, near-death experiences, shamanic journeys, religious miracles, and fairy tales, and shows how UFOs are simultaneously physical and spiritual, presenting a form of intelligence capable of altering the perceptions of witnesses. Chronicling his own investigations into the UFO mystery, the author details how he introduced the late Harvard psychiatrist John Mack to accounts of alien abduction and how he was invited by philanthropist Lawrence S. Rockefeller to lobby then-President Bill Clinton to disclose government-held UFO information. Sharing stories from his friendship with astronaut Edgar D. Mitchell, among others, the author recounts discussions of how best to interpret UFOs and non-ordinary phenomena of various kinds. Thompson reveals how the UFO phenomenon ultimately represents a call from the cosmos for humanity to open to greater dimensions of reality and recognize that our understanding of the universe is still far from complete. Keith, can you please tell our audience what was your biggest inspiration for writing this book? Because I know you have written a few other books on other different topics that are not UFO related. So what brought this about? How was the UFO paradox brought into your existence?
Okay, good, great question. The first thing I can say is I was been asked by a couple of podcast hosts, or I think it was a radio host, could I describe the transition from being an investigative journalist, and they were aware of things I'd written for mainstream publications, a mainstream journalist, investigative journalist covering education and criminal justice and health and fitness. How did I shift from that to becoming a UFO researcher?
Right.
And I remember cocking my head and I said, no, I don't think that's, I don't accept the premise of the question, because I haven't shifted from being an investigative journalist. I've simply taken on something else as an investigative journalist. I didn't decide I'm going to become a UFO researcher. I think this is the same, this topic is as worthy of exploration as anything else. I understand why mainstream journalists are hesitant. There's a huge laughter factor.
Yes.
But in a way, it was as a very young journalist that I had my first experience with this. It was my turn to give a current events report in my 6th grade class. I was 12 years old. And, you know, I'd seen my other classmates do this. They'd pick out a news story and they tell the class about it.
Hmm.
I had actually already become very interested, even at that age. I loved the national news. The CBS newsman Walter Cronkite was very big when I was growing up, and
I
he would
recognize
begin.
that name for sure.
Yeah, he would begin by saying, "Good evening. This is the CBS Evening News. I'm Walter Cronkite. We're going to return again to this remarkable UFO story in Central Michigan. Bob Schieffer is on the spot. Bob, what are you finding?" And
You did
I,
that
I still
great.
I still remember the various correspondents, Bob Schieffer and Morley Safer, and I thought, yeah, this is cool. So anyway, there was a UFO sighting. I grew up in Northwest Ohio,
Okay.
and there was a sighting in Central Michigan, Ann Arbor area, that had been going on for 3 or 4 days. Strange lights, craft, the whole 9 yards. I had no orientation to the subject. I am not a sci-fi person. I respect it as a genre. I've actually always found sci-fi, at least the stuff I've read, a little boring. I mean, a lot of machines and spacecraft, but often not very imaginative metaphysically. But that's just my own bias. So I didn't come at this with Star Trek, Star Wars.
Okay.
I simply found the debate about it, the back and forth, very interesting. So I reported to my class that the Pentagon had sent in their UFO researcher named J. Allen Hynek, their consultant. He was an astronomer, and he was a mainstream scientist who pretty much thought that the at that point that the phenomenon probably could be explained in conventional terms.
Okay.
Most of the sightings could probably be resolved. And so he stood up, he came into town, and I reported on this to my classmate. He came into town, visited a lot of the hot spots, talked to a lot of witnesses, and so it came time to give his news conference. He stood up in front of this, reporters from all over the country had gathered because this
Sure.
was a time when this is a time when UFO stories were really covered by the press, especially when they were big attention-getting events. So he began by saying, "I'm still looking and asking and talking with people. I can say that, however, that the one sighting near the edge of town over near I don't know, the Johnson Swamp, the swampland, the undeveloped swampland, it
Mm.
is possible it could have been, might
Swamp
have been
gas.
swamp gas."
Isn't that where the term was born? It was
It really
coined.
was.
Yeah.
And he said it could have been, might have been. Now, swamp gas is a real natural phenomenon
Sure.
when decomposing material in a riverbed or in a swamp. Swamps are not really friendly places to
They
be,
Right.
stink.
even if there are alligators and poison venomous snakes. So there are gases that get emitted, and they can become illuminated. They can get lit. So the swamp lights, the gases at the swamps lead to lights. He did not say that it was swamp gas. It could have been, might have been. He was trying to take things off the table in
Mm.
specific aspect. He stood there mortified to watch the reporters jump up off their metal chairs in the school auditorium, go out to the bank of payphones and call in the story, "Air Force explains Michigan sightings as swamp gas."
Oh, and from that point forward, all the debunkers and all the skeptics are
Yeah.
like, "Meh, it's swamp gas."
Swamp gas became one of the go-to
It
explanations
did.
in the debunkers tool chest. Weather balloon is another one. It's pretty much
Hmm.
right there. So it came time to take questions. And one of the students said, "Well, Keith, do you think it was aliens from outer space?" Because, of course, that was the $64,000 question.
Sure.
And
Still is, right?
I said, "Well, I don't know. I haven't decided. I'm interested in what people report, and then the interpretations come later." And I did say that I kind of already had an understanding the difference between an observation and an interpretation. And
Mm.
interpretation should be tentative, but there are better interpretations, better hypotheses, and worse. So someone else said, "Well, if you don't think it was if it wasn't swamp gas, what do you think it was?" And I said, "Well, again, I don't know." And I wasn't punting, I wasn't trying to dodge the question. I really didn't know. But then I added, it's certainly what people reported didn't match this swamp gas. And then my teacher was, the report was pretty much finished. My
Hmm.
teacher came up, Mrs. Lowry, and she
Mm.
stood next to me, as she often did with the students. And she said, I think what Keith is trying to tell us is that with something like this, or with any topic in the news, it's important to keep an open mind and ask relevant, informed questions.
Absolutely.
I remember the quiet in the room after she said that. It was like, wow,
It
on
took
my
a minute
part.
for it to like sink in, right, on everybody?
Absolutely. And for me, it was like, it's not only that she didn't rescue me in that moment. She heard me. She
Mm,
saw me. She recognized me as an aspiring adult who might have something to say and contribute, something to contribute simply by showing up and doing their best. Then she
Yeah.
turned to me, and again, standing there, and as teachers often do, they call you by your full name. She said, "Mr. Thompson, that was an excellent report. You have the makings of a reporter or maybe a scientist. Who knows? Maybe a detective." And then she said, "Follow the clues wherever they lead. Follow the evidence wherever it takes you." And again, it was like I describe it in the book as a benediction. It was like a
mm,
blessing to have had at that age that kind of backing, that kind of approval. Those kinds of comments go a long way to either tell you
sure.
that you do have something to contribute, or we all, or not, I shouldn't say we all, but many of us have had those experiences of a teacher who's had a bad day,
Yeah.
and they convey to you that there's probably not as anyone quite as dumb as you. That does happen. Teachers do that, or convey that you don't have your act together, and you can carry that for your whole life. So
Sure.
I carried this for my whole life. So I didn't at that day go out and become a UFO investigator. I remember leaving the room, and we all went out to recess, and
Hmm.
nobody wanted to talk with me about this. We were all playing kickball or whatever. Again, we were 12 years old, but
Yeah.
I could pay attention to this. And my parents noticed how much I prepared, and they were pleased with me. And they said, "Yeah, follow the evidence wherever it leads. There's worse things you could do than to be follow the UFO stuff." And it didn't unbalance me. I wasn't a zealot. I didn't have posters in my room, with flying saucers. Would have been okay with them if I had. I was more interested in this stalemate that invariably happens. Ordinary, reasonable, credible people report incredible, remarkable sightings.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And the agents of official culture, not always, but typically in science, or in the name of science, in the media with the smirking, or academia, the astronomers who say, "Well, we know that this is not very likely. It certainly couldn't be extraterrestrial, and people are prone to misidentify all kinds of things." Sneer, sneer,
I
chuckle.
feel
Yeah.
like I can see a different face on your face as you're saying that.
Oh yeah, it's that.
That was a good
Carl Sagan,
impression, by the way. If
Carl,
you were doing who I think you were doing, that was a good impression.
yeah, Carl Sagan. Some years ago, he kind of played it funny. The astronomer. He was open to the possibility there was something going on, that it could have been extraterrestrial,
Hmm.
but he was pretty much of a scoffer when it came to it, and he liked to make it very clear why, based on everything he knew, and even with the billions and billions of stars, he was always rhapsodizing about the billions and billions of
Yeah.
galaxies.
Yeah.
And I loved him because he did a lot to introduce people to the vastness of space.
Mm.
So in
Sure.
any case, the debunkers always kick in. So there's a stalemate. These sightings are reported by ordinary people on the street, people who are not trained observers, but also by airplane pilots
Yep.
and aircraft, professional airplane pilots, airline
Absolutely.
pilots, what I mean, and military
Military.
officials.
Yep. Hmm.
So I was struck right away. This is the standoff. This is the deadlock that happens, and in the void, there's a fertile void that opens up between "this is what I saw," and then the response, "that didn't happen." It
Yeah.
Mm.
could, because we know from the laws of science. And I was aware, first of all, I knew that's not how science. I was not a science person, hardcore, but I said that's not science.
No.
That's crowd control.
Yeah.
That's a attempt to reassure people. We've got everything figured out. I was already enough a politically independent thinker, not at 12, but as I got a little older, what the government said was for me never the last word. Right? I mean, I do, well, okay, sure, you say it's not going on. Um, I'm not taking that as the final word. Doesn't mean by the way, I buy into all of the conspiracy theories. I don't. I
Hmm.
don't. I don't necessarily. Well, we can talk about what the government knows and doesn't know and all of that. But in any case, I continued to follow all of this. And then I went on to have, so that's sort of the objective side, the me that's a journalist and the work I've done. And then I also decided in the book to disclose some personal experiences, my own experiences of what are called anomalies, anomalous phenomena. By the way, a definition of an anomaly, really, strictly speaking, an anomaly is something that happens that upsets expectations. It's an anomaly because we don't expect it to happen.
Or
Like, I mean,
understand
just
it, right?
simple. You're driving to a dinner party and the traffic light doesn't change for 10 minutes. That's an anomaly.
Yeah.
That's a good example.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an anomaly. It doesn't mean there's a mystical or paranormal definition
Right.
cause, but it's an anomaly. So likewise, the UFO phenomenon is not predicted by our theories. Whatever its source is, it's not. It's so it's an anomaly. So I had anomalous experiences of my own, spiritual experiences that I wasn't prepared for,
Okay.
that opened. And so we can talk about those. I'll let you guys sort of shape the conversation with your questions.
So please share whatever you're willing to share. I know it's in your book, and so
Well,
you might not.
I'll share first of all that I did decide to write about it, and I must tell you that probably you're familiar with it. Given your own interest in these things, you've probably got friends in your life who consider you, oh, you're our woo friends, or the ones who believe
Yeah.
this stuff,
Or the black sheep of the family, whichever one works.
Yeah, so I've written 2 books on the UFO phenomenon. My first is called Angels and Aliens, and that's out of print for now, but I'll actually share some news.
Oh.
As a result of writing this book, I have heard from a publisher who wants to put that book back into print.
Congratulations. That would be
Great.
cool.
It's a great title, I have to say.
Yeah, and it was my first take as a different, and it's a different book. It's different from the second one.
Okay.
And so, in any case, when I worked on when I first began to write about this, I had an assumption that I had not really thought through. And the assumption was precisely because this stuff is so marginal, my credibility will be greater if I'm really objective and I don't have any dog in the fight. I'm not an advocate, and I certainly don't have any experiences of my own. Well, technically, my experiences of the anomalous were not UFO experiences. So I could honestly, when someone said, "Have you ever seen a UFO?" I've actually always been able to say no. I have
Okay.
not seen anything
What
in the
have
sky
you seen then?
that didn't seem to belong there.
Mm.
That said, I have to admit, and you probably agree, have you ever seen the same sky twice? I mean,
No.
the sky is not it's not an object. It's a process. Especially if you sit out on a night, a summer night, with your mosquito repellent or whatever you need, just watch the sky, watch it change, watch it during the day, watch clouds. So when I say I've never seen anything that didn't seem to belong there, what belongs in the sky or what doesn't belong? I really have become far more philosophical. The sky is a process.
I love
It's
that.
it's a happening. So anyway,
So I have to share something after this, but I just don't want to forget because I feel
okay,
like
good. Well, so maybe I'll sort of open it to what you want to say. In any case, but so I came to the conclusion with this second book on the UFO phenomenon, especially as I got in touch, since I began to, in this book, I focused on witnesses in a couple of the major cases, the Zimbabwe, Africa case,
Area
Ariel
school. Yes.
Ariel School, which we can talk about, and also the Pascagoula, Mississippi case, the 2
Mm.
fishermen who
Yes.
out on the Pascagoula River one night in October, and when
Yep.
I talk like them.
I love it.
Greatest respect, because the one I didn't meet the first witness, Charlie Hickson, but I did know Calvin Parker, and I went down to
Wow.
Pensacola in his last year of his life, and he was so welcome and so generous with his time. Mr. Thompson, I'll answer any question you got, but you'll find that I answer it the way I've answered it for 40 years. I don't have anything to embellish. That's the term that debunkers use. They're always listening. Am I embellishing with anything new? No, I haven't remembered anything new. Here's what happened that night. So, this is gold when you meet people like that.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
in any case, I said, if I'm going to write about the challenges they felt in their life, with do I reveal this or not, I'm going to talk about my own. So I will tell you what happened to me when I was 14 years old. I come from a family. I have 3 brothers, 4 boys, fairly close together. My mother has passed, but I have greater respect with each day about what it must have been like to raise 4 boys who were that rambunctious, and physical and wild. My dad had his say on these things too, so we weren't too unruly. In any case,
Okay.
we had a house with a TV antenna that was actually built into the ground. Some TV antennas are just on the roof, but this was a
Right.
TV antenna that was literally like a ladder. I think they built them that way so that the repair people could get up on the roof.
Mm,
But my parents, it was a 3-story house, and my parents had strict rules. We do not climb up the TV antenna.
okay.
Well, that was just that told me I
That
need
was a
to do it
challenge.
in a way never to get caught. That's what.
Right.
So one time when my parents were gone, I remember the day. It was either spring or summer. I climbed up on the roof as I often did. My brothers were gone. I was the only one at home, as I recall. There was no sense of anybody
You're like,
else.
this is my opportunity. I'm gonna take
And
it.
what I did, I didn't go smoke any cigarettes or use any drugs or anything. I would just go up. I found a little place. You know that song from the 1960s, "Up on the Roof"? When this old world starts getting me down, and people are much too much for me to take, I climb right up to the top of the stairs, and all my cares just seem to drift away. Now, I did not even know I had those lyrics in my mind, but I would go up on the roof and I would lay back in a little nook and cranny. I wasn't in danger of falling from the top to the ground. And I would just rest and look into the sky and so one day when I did that, I looked into the sky with no purpose or aim, and suddenly I was everywhere and nowhere at once.
Mm.
I had a sense of being everywhere and everything, and no specific place or no specific thing. It was just a sense of radical presence
Wow.
that I was here, and there was a brilliance that seemed to flow through me, and it flowed through my heart. I
Wow.
was very aware of it. And by the way, I don't know how long it lasted in clock time,
Yeah.
in chronos, it's the Greek term, minutes. I
Uh-huh.
don't know about that, but I do know it was like it lifted me beyond time and space. And I had an instant, by the way, let me just frame this. I did not have a religious upbringing. My parents
Okay.
took us to church. But my mom did. My dad never did. We never understood. My father's also passed. I never really understood. He wasn't an atheist, to my knowledge. Church was not his thing. So we were not a devout family. I often say that my mom
Yeah.
felt it was good for good people to be seen going to church.
Oh,
You know,
okay. I
you
gotcha.
keep up appearances. We were good people, and good people like to be seen going to church. So it wasn't even just that good people go to church. Good people get seen going to church. So I'm
Okay.
just telling you that I did not have a biblical orientation or
Okay.
any devout, evangelical orientation. And this wasn't an evangelical experience. It was what I came to realize later, a mystical experience. It was a full-blown recognition, because the recognition was that there was purpose and meaning in the very heart of things. I knew that I was 14 years old. I knew that even then. It was not only not an experience of going to some other realm, it was that other realm was here. This is bigger than we know.
Wow.
This
Yes.
is bigger
Yes.
than we know. And it was beatific, to use a fancy term. It was the sense of peace and almost joy that I had been shown. I'd seen something. I was like the curtains had parted. So I I remember ambling back down. I wasn't, unstable or having trouble with my balance. I was more centered than I think I'd ever been. I
Hmm.
certainly didn't wait for my parents to come home. And when they said, "What'd you do today, Keith, after school?" I didn't say, "I experienced being completely one with the universe and the separation and a complete separation between me. And by the way, this is true for all of us." No, I didn't tell my parents that.
You're like, I just took a
No,
nap.
because not only were we not a particularly religious family, I would have been met with that's not normal. Don't say that anymore.
Oh,
It's
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's just weird. We were not a metaphysically imaginative family. But I did know, but at the same time, I didn't hide it because it was I was embarrassed, or because I didn't believe it was true, or I had anything to be ashamed of. I actually felt that I had seen more of what is, and I also intuitively knew other people knew about this. I
Yes.
just knew it because it was the most real experience I'd ever had. I didn't have any sense, how do I apply this? What do I do with it? No, it was about being. And I would have little hints of this. this moment would return. I remember my dad, of the four sons, he had a great sense of humor, and I
Okay.
picked up his sense of humor too. But sometimes he would just say to me at dinner, he said, "Now, what are you smiling about?" Because I was just smiling, and the truth is, there were times when I was just
You're
filled
just blissful.
with bliss. I was filled with a kind of quiet bliss. Don't imagine that I'm saying I didn't have normal problems as a kid, with girls and my ranking with guys and how I stood in the pecking order of life. No, I had my normal. It didn't resolve all my psychological issues, but it gave me a sense that the very ground of being was a safe place, and it it really opened the door, not right away, but it opened the door to read spiritual things. I was at a natural. I remember in college, it would be 4 years later. It was a time when Transcendental Meditation, TM, was being taught widely, the
Mm.
Maharishi from India, and so it was a
Yeah.
way for people to be introduced to meditation without a lot of the woo-woo stuff. The TM people emphasize improve your grade point average, improve your self-confidence, and you'll need to have less sleep. Sort of all the benefits that meditation would bring health and fitness wise. He didn't deny that it was a spiritual practice, but he was brilliant enough
He didn't
to
sell it that way to the
to sell it to
Westerners. Yeah,
America.
yeah,
Don't want to sell it in terms of the Hindu Vedas.
No.
right.
Although he had his long hair and his beads, and he attracted John, George, Paul, and Ringo, and they hung out with him. And there were a lot of LSD going on at that time. So anyway, I took the TM course 2 weekends and practiced meditation, and
Mm.
so that was an orientation. It didn't change my views about UFOs. It actually gave me a way to explore the UFO phenomenon from a sense that this is about something much larger. Whatever this
Okay.
is, because let me now take it back to the phenomena.
Sure.
Back in my researcher mentality. Um, uh, this whole instruction I got from my class teacher, follow the evidence wherever it leads, she said. So I was not from a family or a community that valued, quote, the paranormal. In my family, we didn't have paranormal experiences, we didn't have seances, and we didn't have poltergeists.
Okay.
And so I didn't have any, and I'm certainly glad, because most poltergeists are not really happy occasions. In any case, when I began to realize that the UFO sightings really had these persistent paranormal dimensions, the witnesses would often have telepathic interactions with
Yes.
the entity, or it would open up telepathy, which, by the way, I believe telepathy, clairvoyance, psychokinesis, precognition are innate human skills, which
Yes.
Ooh.
which are more upfront for some.
I'm so glad you said that.
But it's like athletic. I'm not going to be Michael Jordan in basketball, but I can get onto the court.
Sure.
Sure.
Right? So there are people
Practice.
who are,
Practice makes perfect.
the TV show with Tyler Henry, for example.
Yes.
Oh yeah. We watched that.
He's got a particular talent. I mean, he's got a particular talent.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, he did
I
an
want-
interview with Gary Nolan, and they talked about the brain and the basal ganglia, and how like psychics have a certain part of their brain that has more neural connections, and they think that's linked to why, and how brains in people like that have like a stronger antenna kind of thing.
I didn't know that they'd had that interview, so I'm going to look forward to seeing that. I do know that I've met Dr. Gary. I call him. I know Gary. We're not close friends,
Oh.
but he's a very, very cool guy. He is the kind of academic. He's at Stanford, right? One
Yeah.
of the,
Yes,
top of the food chain, right?
we love Gary Nolan around here.
Well, and he's
know.
probably in our lifetime, maybe within a matter of months or years, he will have a Nobel Prize for something, because
I
he's
think
just
so too.
top level immunology and so forth. And he also, precisely because he doesn't have self-confidence issues, he knows he can speculate about far out stuff. And when people accuse him as, oh, Dr. Nolan at Stanford is a believer, he goes, well, that's your story. I never said believed anything. I said, I'm asking questions. The realm of speculation is the stage just prior to creating a hypothesis. Of course, scientists speculate all the time. If this is extraterrestrial, it would mean this. If it's from other dimensions, it might mean that. That's perfectly appropriate. So to make it clear, I have a lot of respect for Gary Nolan asking tough questions about phenomena that are not widely accepted. So and yeah, so Tyler Henry would be an example of some pretty clear talent he's got, and I think this is a widespread human talent, and we're pretty ambivalent about it as a species, right? We're not
Yeah.
want to have that kind of knowledge. So I mentioned that because I opened as a researcher. I said, well, this seems to have a paranormal dimension. And I also knew that a lot of those who were wedded to the idea that this is probably nothing more than extraterrestrial, probably just craft that are more advanced than ours.
Yeah.
There could be some of that. This researcher, David Grush, a military official, has pointed to what may be in the hangars of McDonnell Douglas or Lockheed Martin,
Mhm.
recovered aircraft. He's told by people on the inside, supposedly. I say supposedly only to say that's what he says. He
Right.
hasn't seen it himself, but he's a researcher like I'm. He's following the evidence wherever it leads, and
Yes.
hasn't reached firm conclusions that I know of. And apparently also biological material is.
That.
We'll
Mhm.
see. So in any case, I've opened up to the paranormal side of this, and it informs how I approach all of it.
Well, just to mention real quick about what I experienced last night,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's not. I mean, I don't think it. I see it as a spiritual, or the interconnectedness of everything, and I do feel like everything is all part of one source creation that has like just however endless amounts of different creations out there. But what I was gonna say is that so last night I looked up at the sky in my backyard. There's this open patch of sky, and it was just a really clear night. I was admiring the stars. Of course, I'm thinking, it'd be cool to see like a UFO or something while I'm out here looking up at the sky or whatever. But I didn't really focus on that too much. But my thought process, I just felt the need to send love to the cosmos, and I thought it. I said, I'm sending love to the cosmos, and I'm looking up at the sky, and a shooting star, literally right after I had that thought, just shot, and I was like, wow, it just made my night, and
That's really
so
cool.
Yeah.
Congratulations. I haven't seen a shooting star in a while. You saw one the other night though, right?
Yeah, I did actually from
Yeah.
work.
But
Oh,
you never
no,
know,
from-
it
yeah,
could have
from
been
the
a
backyard,
UFO
too. Yep.
trying to look like a shooting star. It was a very short, spurt. It wasn't a long streak or anything, but it was a short, quick thing right after I had the thought of sending love to the cosmos. So I love that.
Gratification.
Awesome.
I mentioned Carl Sagan. You're probably familiar with the series he did back in the 70s. It's still available. It's called Cosmos.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
10-part, really beautiful. And he would really rhapsodize. He was officially an atheist. He did not like organized religion.
Right.
But there was always a flavor in his approach to the cosmos of a mystic, that our connection to this larger thing and how small we are in comparison. In my book, I write about an awareness I had about Carl Sagan that always seemed more the grandiosity, the grandness of the universe for Carl Sagan seemed to be related to the fact that it was so far off. It was so much bigger than us, and we in comparison are so small. But the grandeur of the universe was that it was so much big stuff so far away. And I get that that's part of what our enchantment with the cosmos is. And I say to the reader in my book, I had ended up with a different sense of cosmos, namely that it starts right here. That vastness is always here. And that's what was informed by my 14-year-old experience on the roof.
That's beautiful.
When I define in my book, I speak of the UFO phenomenon and the paranormal phenomena in general, the near-death experience.
I was just going to ask you about that, but go ahead.
Well, I'll talk about that because that was the second sort of breakthrough for me. Again, totally unexpected. I call all of these calls from the cosmos, calls from reality to us to open to a larger sense of reality. It isn't that nature is suddenly improvising and creating a lot of new stuff, although that's always possible. It's that our worldview has been too small and too small for too long.
Yeah,
I like
so
that.
what I argue in the book, or what I maintain, what I propose, I don't do a lot of our arguing, although I like the fashion sense of, argue. You put forward an argument, you make a case. Well,
Sure.
I make a case for the idea that the um, and it's such an important case. I just lost my thought.
It's okay.
That happens.
um, oh, the idea is, yes, I know what I'm going to say. That at a certain point, it gets to be clear that when we've got to ask different questions. When there is a consistent body of evidence for an arena of existence that isn't explained, but it's coherent, it's congruent, it's consistent, but it's not showing up on the maps of reality, whether it's the UFO phenomenon, near-death phenomena, psychic phenomena. At some point, the reasonable question is to say, maybe it's our maps.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the maps haven't been updated. And has anybody checked the maps lately? You know, I say maps because by maps, I mean our theories, our hypotheses.
Yeah.
Sure.
When Columbus and Magellan were coming over to the New World from Spain, on their maps, their literal canvas maps or whatever they were made of, they would often have a section cordoned off with an arrow. There be sea serpents out there. You know, the pirate kind of.
Yar.
That's sea serpents meant the unknown. Well, our maps now haven't evolved that much beyond that. So the UFO phenomenon is sea serpents, meaning it's we don't know what to do with it. It's like when Galileo, the greatest Italian astronomer, used his computations and his telescope to combine those two, and he concluded, whoa, nobody expected this. The Earth revolves around the sun, not vice versa.
Right.
Copernicus, right. He began to spread word about this, and he got a knock on the door from gentlemen in their purple robes from the Vatican.
Telling him to zip it.
Zip it. We don't say this. That's not true.
Right.
He goes, you don't, and it violates faith. The church is the arbiter of these things. He said, I'm a religious man myself. I'm a devout Catholic. It's not this isn't, and that isn't challenged by what I'm pointing out. But you don't have to take my word for it, he said. Look at my computations over there on the table and look through my telescope. And they famously said, no,
nope,
don't look through your telescope. They've refused to look through.
They're happy living in the little box they've created around there.
Well,
and we're experiencing a lot of that.
Yeah, what they were
right now.
essentially admitting was that they refused to avail themselves of the very means by which they could either confirm or disconfirm. Maybe he got it wrong. So that you think they weren't scientists, they were theologians, but you think, well, I'll take a look. Well, it could be, but it probably isn't. But instead, they said, if you don't stop saying this heretical thing, we'll put you under house arrest. I don't know if they used the term house arrest, but they did keep him, and he kept saying, and they put him under house arrest, which is better than burning him at the stake, because actually there were mobs that took a few scientists in that era and did put them to death by fire. So ironically, the scientists now are often, today's scientists are very often more in the guise of the religious. So at that time, the theologians were the thought police. Now it's the scientists who are thought police. In our materialist scientists who do not accept that mind has any standing that is separate from the material world. And there's just a huge amount of evidence that mind does have independent standing, where it's not totally dependent on the physical world. The anomaly is not consciousness, but the idea that there's something other than consciousness. I mean, that's a larger discussion we could have, but those are the kind of issues I address in the book, as you know.
Yeah. Have you heard of Dr. Donald Hoffman before, and his theories about consciousness being fundamental?
Yes, I have. He's sometimes late at night, I want to put on a podcast. He is so ingratiating and warm and charming. I don't know if you had a chance to talk with him. He seems quite willing to go on to podcasts, and he's
we should reach out.
Okay.
He's concluded that time and space are doomed, meaning as fundamental constructs.
Yes.
That rather than consciousness existing as a tiny little area in time and space exists in consciousness. Time and space is a framework, a dial, a dashboard, a computer emblem, if you will, a computer icon.
Yeah.
And it's a larger, but yes, he's arguing that consciousness is fundamental. I have not I've not talked with him about this subject, but I'm sure it's been brought up. That is to say, the UFO phenomenon and the paranormal in general. But he's an original thinker, Donald Hoffman.
Absolutely.
The Case Against Reality, I think is the title of his book.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's
It's a
somebody
good
else
book.
that's been persisting in my brain that I wanted to see if you were aware of. Are you aware of the studies that Jim Segala has been doing with the MUPAS devices? Are you familiar with the MUPAS?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Oh,
It's basically like a radar detection
Yeah,
system where
it's-
it has
it's-
all different types of systems and sensors in it.
So MUPA stands for Modular UAP Sensor System.
Yeah, and it's able to record phenomenon with either like gamma radiation or radio frequencies or temperature spikes, or like they measure like a wide array of things, and they're able to basically now predict when phenomenon is going to occur based off of the findings of the study. It's really cool.
Well, those are the kind of thing I call myself an empiricist. I follow the evidence wherever it leads. So
Shout out to Miss Lowry, by the way. That's another thing that's been swimming around in my brain. Shout out to Miss Lowry. As an educator, if she really influenced you that much as the little 6th grade Keith sitting there presenting his UFO current event project, and she really took that and just like gave you validation and encouragement that you literally took with you for the rest of your life as a fellow educator, I respect that. So shout out Miss Lowry.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Lowry.
Absolutely. And empiricism takes many forms. The mainstream Western materialist framework says fine for empiricism, but of course it can only be limited to the 5 senses.
Yeah.
They don't have a kind of integral empiricism that says, no, we can actually be empirical toward states of consciousness. We can be empirical toward all kinds of experiences. And there are many examples. So I'm a full it's as if Western materialists say yes to empiricism, but just not too much of it. Just don't apply it to things that are these categories like woo. Sure, I mean, you could call woo anything that isn't thought out well, but that isn't what's meant by woo. It's simply stuff that's currently off the maps, for which there's evidence of a reality. So I don't know. Somebody asked me on a podcast recently, how have I? What was it? They said, have you ever felt that you didn't have respect because of exploring this phenomenon? And I said, not at all. Not at all. I wasn't raised with any religious issues about this. Many people are, the UFOs are not of God. They're not described in the Bible.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I understand those to me, those are not empirical questions. Those are not final questions. But religious teachings have a place in people's lives. I respect that very much. I'm religious and spiritual being 2 terms for sort of that territory. But in any case, no, I don't have I don't have the kind of I'm not entirely fearless, but it's like I'll go for anything. I'm naturally curious, and I was instructed by my 6th grade teacher to follow the evidence wherever it leads. So I didn't choose to be a detective, but what kind of detective would arrive at a crime scene and say, well, I could rule that out of bounds in advance? No, you don't begin by ruling issues, territories, items out of bounds. You draw the yellow tape around the crime scene to preserve it, and you study it. And the same with science. Science doesn't begin by saying, well, this isn't likely true, so we'll remove that from the table. No, that isn't how science works either. So I chose the 3rd path my teacher described. I became a writer, a journalist, and not all journalism is willing to look at everything, but the journalistic enterprise is to investigate and come up with truth.
Yeah.
We are all truth seekers on this call. That is faux show.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Leslie, I feel like we should give you a chance to ask a question. I tend to take over and not shut up, so I'll give you a shot.
Sure. Let's see. Could it be that UFOs and their apparent occupants are not from other galaxies or star systems, but from dimensions beyond time, space, as we currently understand it?
Oh, good question.
The answer is that could be. Yes, the answer is yes. There's about 20 years ago, Jacques Vallée, one of the greatest writers in this field, a French astronomer, and a physicist named Eric Davis, wrote a paper together. I describe it in the book called The Physics of High Strangeness. And they argued on that paper that there is no experimental basis for distinguishing between, when you look at the phenomenon itself, there's no experimental basis. There's no experiments that they've been able to perform that could distinguish, is this from outer space, other galaxies, or is it from parallel realities, interdimensional phenomena of the kind that string theory in physics speaks of, not just three dimensions of space and one of time, but anywhere between 11 or 26 additional dimensions.
Yeah.
Wormhole, could that be a way these phenomena are coming in? Are they, some of them, time travelers? They're certainly calling into question our sense of time. We don't understand time and space very well.
Right.
Except Will Hoffman has in his case, his argument is he has actually proven that time and space are constructs. They're actually part of our perceptual apparatus. Time is highly subjective, and so is space. So yes, the idea is these could very well be visitors from other realities, not just other galaxies. So
and near-death experiences also touch on the time, space, and their experiences, that it's also a part of this reality here on Earth. So
absolutely, and that sort of opens the door. You asked about it earlier, Ali, or referred to it. I decided also to reveal my experience with my own near-death experience, and there were a couple of boundaries around it that like my 14-year-old experience on the roof, I came to realize that I would talk about that very casually, or not talk about it casually. Talk about it carefully, talk about it mindfully, share with others who would be open. And as I sort of asked spiritual questions in my life, then I began to find other people who were open. Well, so in my 20s, I had an experience with a bunch of friends. We'd gone from California, where I lived at the time, to Hawaii. And we went out one day to do body surfing in a very dangerous beach, it turned out. I didn't abide the rules very carefully. The signs, there were permanent physical signs built in steel, well-made signs with the phrase, if in doubt, don't go out.
Keith's like, I'm just going to ignore that.
I didn't have any doubt because I was in my 20s. And we'd come to Hawaii specifically to run a marathon. So a bunch of us had the Honolulu Marathon. The day before, we finished at different speeds, 26.2 miles. That's kind of a heroic episode in your life. It's one of those take it off the bucket list experiences. So we went to the beach. We wanted to play in the waves, get some, water hydrotherapy, relaxing because our bodies were sore and stiff. I just got carried away by riptides. I didn't know how riptides work. They're the undertow that pulls you out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got pulled out fast. There were signs that said I found out later how to manage riptides. I didn't manage them right, so I fought against them. That exhausted me. Got taken out very fast. My friends thought I was gone. I actually at one point thought I was gone. I got hit by a very big wave from behind, a wave coming from toward the beach, like a Hawaii 5-0 surfer, 13-foot or whatever, and it absolutely floored me. It took me to the base of the ocean floor. And I remember saying, I'm going to die. I was it was
you
that
had
kind
that thought, huh?
I had that thought.
Wow.
And the next thing I thought, I go, well, maybe not, because I felt that I was rising up. But I then realized, to my utter amazement, I wasn't rising out of the water. The body was in the water. I was rising out of the body.
Whoa.
I had never had an out-of-body experience. I had never heard of out-of-body experiences, because even though I'd sort of gotten interested in spiritual things, I didn't have a lot of interest at that time in psychic phenomena or the out-of-body experience. I don't think I'd ever heard of it. So, but I left my body through the back of my head, and I saw the body called Keith, and instantly had a recognition, well, that can't be me, because I'm me. I am the one saying I, and I'm no longer saying it from inside that body.
Wow.
Then I saw my friends on the beach looking at the body, talk, Keith, and they couldn't get me. They would have drowned too. It was that kind of really treacherous.
Yeah.
And the couple came out on surfboards, and they had to turn back, the locals who knew this was a guy who didn't know what he was doing. So I remember out of my body having a panoramic view, and I remember also saying, oh, dead isn't dead. I knew that I was pretty certain, existentially certain that I had died, that I was in the beginning of the dying process, that I was on the suburbs. The
He said,
suburbs of
I was in
death.
the death burbs.
Yeah, maybe I wasn't yet in the inner city, so to speak, but I was approaching quickly. And here's the funny thing, or the key thing. My friend Mary, we all were a bunch of friends, and Mary was a dear friend who became even a closer friend as I survived this. By the way, I'm here, so obviously it was a near-death experience.
Right.
I heard Mary standing on the beach with our friend Moore, and she said, "Why?" With the same tone of voice, the same volume of voice that I'm using right now, and that we're using. She said, "Why didn't he listen? I told him that it was not safe. I told him it was dangerous. Why didn't he listen?" She was anguished, right? She
Sure.
wasn't shouting it out to the universe, though. She was speaking to my body, speaking, "Why didn't he?" 200 yards out.
Yeah.
Trust me. Anyway, I heard this. I heard what she was saying. So it's hard to describe, but I went to her, even though I wasn't in the body, and my experience was just this vast, boundless space of awareness and knowing, a cognizant space, a space of knowing, deep knowing. And I said to her, or I tried to say, "Mary, I'm okay. I'm actually fine. You're fine. Life is fine.
Everything is okay.
It's all okay. I won't, and I won't be coming back, and that's fine. I know you're going to have a hard time with it, but anyway, I'm fine." She didn't hear me, so I realized, oh, I can hear living people; they can't hear me. More evidence that I was, dying, or that I was in that realm. So I don't know how it happened, but after an experience, I won't go into great detail about this, but I had an experience of going through the tunnel. By the way, I must add, I was not aware of the near-death experience either. I had not heard. I'm old enough that the book called Life After Life by Raymond Moody, the first book that broke the near-death experience into popular understanding, had been published. But I was a kid. I was a young person interested in near-life experiences.
It hadn't come into your awareness yet, right?
Wouldn't be reading a book about near-death.
Right.
Death was not a big experience in my family. I wasn't resolving any childhood trauma around death. I had a trauma that day at the beach. So in any case, I went through the tunnel that I didn't know existed. I went through the field of light. I reviewed and relived my entire life with a precision of karmic understanding that I didn't know how to explain. Karma.
Wow.
I had compassion for everything that I had done. I had a sense of responsibility for what I'd caused. I had a sense for when other people had been unkind to me, what they were bringing into it. There was no judgment, no blame.
Wow.
And it was living my entire life in that moment in a very short period of time, which I did not know. The reliving of life is central to much of the near-death experience.
That's my favorite part, hearing about that.
I didn't have one of those moments when the wisdom source said, "You must go back. You have work to do." That's the
Yeah.
I just found myself suddenly in a cove, looking through these eyes again, looking through this body, and there were two dolphins accompanying me. I guess they had brought me in. That was also not part of my worldview at the time, but I thought these dolphins, and that my friends were coming out.
They escorted you? Is that what you just said?
They were escorting me.
If they helped.
And I did not know at the time, but dolphins actually play that role. They rescue people.
Yes, I've seen that.
You just made my heart like oh my gosh.
You.
Yeah, and they will protect people from sharks also.
I was thinking, did angels step in to pull you into the cove? But then you bring up the dolphins, and I'm like, whoa, the dolphins did it. Anyway,
there's a line in the Bible. Anyone who's listening more biblically oriented than me, it's something along the lines of one of the books. Do not hesitate to entertain strangers, for many have encountered angels unaware. So the stranger might be the angel. We think of angels as meeting they look a certain way, they come in angelic garb. But one of the books of the Bible says the angel may not appear as what you call an angel.
They could have came with flippers and a blowhole in your case.
Yeah, exactly. So my friends went into I was in a cove. I was trying to steady myself. and I had cuts and scrapes, but fortunately nothing more severe. You know, many people when they come back from near death have come back from a traumatic auto accident, and they have
Oh, sure, yeah.
pain. They wish they didn't have. They wish they hadn't come back. I remember the first thing. First of all, I was as lucid as I've ever been. And I remember the first thing I said to my friends who were gathering me, but they were like, you know, just helping me steady and helping me, putting their arms around me so that I could walk. And I said to them, referring to everything I had just been through, including the heavenly scene, including seeing deceased relatives, which larger story for another time.
Okay.
I did not know that was a near-death experience, but I knew that I'd come back. I said, I died and came back. I was certain of that. So I said, did you guys see all that? They said they saw it too. I said, well, then, okay, we went through some kind of group thing. They said, see what? And I said, I knew that I did, you know, I did not have the language for it. And one of my friends, Moore, who stood there with Mary, said, man, we thought you'd given it up out there. And I said, oh, good. There's an opening. I said, I did. I went to death. I went to beyond death. But then I came back. I don't know how. And I could tell by looking at them. Now, I was highly lucid. They did not see me as lucid.
They thought this guy's tripping.
Hallucinating. They saw me as delirious. That's a sign of my lucidity. I said, okay, Keith, this isn't going to go well. You must not have this kind
I mean,
so
even through your whole experience, you were like still in that journalist, you know, your consciousness was like, you're like trying to figure out the truth of what was happening to you.
Yeah, and that I was certain that it had happened. By the way, when I got back, in the period of time to come, well, first of all, I eventually found out when I did tell the right people about this, they said, oh, you had a near-death experience. You need to read the book by Raymond Moody. So I found out pretty soon.
Okay. I was wondering when you found out about what near-death experiences are.
I was fortunate to meet Dr. Kenneth Ring, who is still kicking. He's in his 90s, but he was one of the leading near-death researchers. So he became a friend. I seek people out when I want information. I have a right to know, and I will find who will give me the information. I am intrepid in that regard.
Okay.
So, here's the funny thing. The next day, after recovering, and I decided, you know, I'd focus on getting a hot bath and some food, and I was the hero for the night, I guess you could say. The next day, I said to my friend Mary, would you go for a walk with me? Let's go for a walk. She said, okay. She kind of probably knew I wanted to talk about what had happened. I said to her, I heard what you said yesterday at the beach on shore. She goes, what are you talking about? Why didn't he listen? I told him it was not safe. I told him it's too dangerous. I fed this right back to her. I can't tell you what it was like to watch the blood drain out of her face. Because while the two of us were in our 20s, just buddies, she was there with her boyfriend. So it was not a romantic thing. That would make it a wonderful screenplay or something. She's just a buddy, and she's there with Jim. But she was a friend. And we neither of us were philosophically oriented enough to know that what it said, that I'd had an experience of non-local communication. Just like when people come back in the hospital from surgery, from a near-death experience, where the flatline, the heartbeat nearly disappears, etc. And the doctor said, now that you're back and the anesthesia has worn off, let me tell you what the prognosis from the surgery is. And the patient says, oh, I know the prognosis. I overheard you talking with Dr. Smith in the other wing of the hospital 2 hours ago. You were eating the tuna fish sandwich. You got it on your tie. I see the spot. And on the building right outside, there's a tennis shoe up in the gutter. Really weird stuff.
But it can be confirmed.
The doctor goes to
veridical evidence. I'm saying it wrong. Veridical evidence or something like that.
Veridical evidence, exactly. I mean, fact. So he would go to the window, sees the tennis shoe. He's wearing the tie with the mayonnaise. And he did have a conversation with the other doctor beyond the hearing range of the person. The best researchers on the near-death experience, like Gary Nolan on the UFO experience, have been skeptics very often. I mean, they're not debunkers, but Dr. Bruce Grayson, who's one of the best researchers on the near-death experience, was not a debunker, but he was raised by an atheist or non-religious family, a scientific family. Medical school did not give him any reason to expect that he would encounter experiences like this. So in any case, Mary and I developed a close friendship, and we talked a lot about death, about life. That I had concluded that the fear of death is the fear that underlies most every other fear. The fear that we will not exist is the same fear that we have when we lose our boyfriend or our girlfriend or the
That it's just
relationship.
over, right? That it's just
We
done.
won't exist. We
Yeah.
won't be here anymore. I can't listen to country music. I can't live without you.
Yeah.
And that's country music and rhythm and blues, but it's sadder with rhythm and blues and the blues. I can't
Yeah.
live without you, baby. So I will not live without you, baby. So, and by the way, I came back when I came back from that Hawaii, when I came back to shore, so to speak, came back to Earth. I had no fear of death. I can't say I accomplished a no fear of death. It wasn't an achievement. It drained away. And to this day, I don't know how I'll die. I don't know what kind of condition my body will be in, but I have a deep sense of confidence that that the proper juxtaposition is between birth and death. We often say life or death. No, it's birth and death. Life continues. I'm confident of that. Life continues in other forms. So the postmortem life, there's a lot of evidence for it. It's probably going to be my next work because I'm going to take on the big one, death.
Nice. That's awesome.
So
It's
anyway,
all
I really focus. In telling you all this, I'm focusing on more on my own experience than I actually describe in the book. I relate this, but it's more of a secondary line. Most of the book is about the major UFO cases that I've covered, and that's the book is called the UFO Paradox, and it deals primarily with UFOs. But because of the interest we all have in these larger questions, I'm focusing more on these issues.
I have a question that kind of is gonna go off a little bit on what we've been discussing, but reports that aliens have abducted humans and have performed what seem like medical experiments are among the most controversial claims. What do you say about abductions, and do they really happen?
Yeah, so I'm making a distinction for convenience sake between the events and the experience. I don't know what happens as events. Most of the researchers, well, not some of the researchers of the abduction researchers were pretty clear that these are hard-edged, real happenings, real aliens. They're kidnappings. People are taken against their will. That is certainly their experience. There's also reason to think that in some cases, by their own descriptions, these are out-of-body experiences. They take place in a larger sense of embodiment, subtle realms, the subtle, theosophy, the astral realm, the causal realm, the mental body. But at the same time, they have physical dimensions. The abductees come back with what many of them report these little scoop marks in their body, like these entities are taking biopsies. They seem rather consistently to involve reports that the entities are interested in our genetics. They take sperm from the men and ovum from the women and present them later with infants that are allegedly hybrids. So it gets very weird. I say that the abduction experience is real. There's no such thing. There's no signs of a alien abduction pathology. John Mack, the psychiatrist from Harvard, who I got a chance to know and work with, he got into it as a psychiatrist, and he became convinced. He said the first hypothesis I wanted to investigate is there a mental disorder here? Well, he found there's mental disturbance because if you've had the experience, if you feel you're abducted, you're probably not going to be entirely back yet. You're going to have some adjustment patterns. But no, there is no pre-existing dimension. There's no pre-existing disorder. The debunkers like to suggest that there is. There are sleep disorders that happen. Many of the abductions happen on the edge of sleep or wakefulness, but these are a different category. So are these beings, where are the beings from? What is the purpose of the entities? Actually, Jacques Vallée, the researcher I mentioned before, been at it for quite a long time. He's in his 90s now. He has said he is convinced that as for the display of the hybrids and he said he believes they're actually real intelligences putting on the show that these are real hybrids They're not. They are interested in increasing our belief that it is real. So he believes that one part of the phenomenon is to communicate us through images symbolically that are designed to capture our belief so that we, for what purpose is unclear. So
That makes
anyway,
sense. Like slow disclosure, not from the government, but from them. But I was gonna wrap it back up to the NDE because while you were answering the question about the abductions, I was thinking about how Allie and Justin and I have had conversations about the possibility that there was agreement to these types of meetings, and even what's going on as far as the medical aspect of the abductions, and but to the human, because of the veil of forgetfulness or whatever you might call it, it seems like a scary experience, but it seems like in a lot of the abductions that they are trying to, in a way, calm the human, or let them know that it's okay, even though it seems like really bizarre and out there. But yeah, in near-death experiences, a lot of people come to the realization or the knowing that this was all planned. Their whole life was planned, people in their lives were planned, even challenges and traumas and things like that may have even been planned, but it's all for the purpose of learning and growing and evolving. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on the abductions and the possibility that they're, that's in the blueprint, for lack of a
gee, there's a couple places to go with there. Let me emphasize there was a split in the abduction among the researchers. John Mack represented one viewpoint, and he worked closely with the two other researchers who had a different viewpoint, David Jacobs of Temple University and Bud Hopkins. Bud Hopkins wrote a couple of books, one called Missing Time and one called In Truth. So both Hopkins and Jacobs took a view that these were they were violating our human rights. These are kidnappers. They're bad hombres, and we need to take a stand. I don't know what form to take a stand. Mack came into it, interestingly, through a different venue. John Mack was a Harvard psychiatrist. He unfortunately died just about two decades ago, an automobile accident.
Right.
Nearly 2 decades to the date in September. He was trained in Freudian reductionistic psychiatry, the materialistic worldview. His parents were atheists, not card carrying, but nothing beyond this world. So he had that as his bias. That was his orientation. He came to California, had some opportunities to avail himself of experience. He got to know Dr. Stan Grof, one of the leading psychiatrists who had done legitimate research, science-based research on psychedelic phenomena, including LSD research. So John Mack experimented with psychedelics in a therapeutic setting, had some very mind-expanding experiences. He also practiced holotropic breath work, which was the breath work that Stan Grof and his late wife, Christina Grof, developed, in which people would use controlled breathing to attain an expanded state of consciousness, greater sense of reality, to explore transpersonal states of the kind that we're talking about. So John Mack came into it with a sense that, wait a minute, these phenomena point to a larger worldview, to a larger sense of realities that we don't account for. Whereas Hopkins and Jacobs viewed reality doesn't need any more dimensions. We just have 3 of space and 1 of time, and these are real aliens coming in. We don't, and they really did not value the paranormal experience because they didn't really believe in it. So imagine UFO researchers, abduction researchers who didn't think paranormal research was very sophisticated. They didn't tend to believe in the paranormal, but they assumed abductions were real events. Whereas the general consensus is that, in fact, there's a great deal of credibility in the paranormal research at this point. The laboratory studies of it, as well as the field work, telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition, and psychokinesis are real. They've been established as real. And everyday experience, we all have openings, synchronicities. That's a key category. Jung,
Synchronicity.
so the other researchers said, "Oh, that stuff is very speculative. We don't need a larger worldview. Consciousness, But John thought that was a bigger issue. So I'm finding the field is far more open now. I
Okay.
found a reception to my book, for example, that there may be an extraterrestrial dimension. David Grush has given the Inspector General of the intelligence community dates, names,
Yes,
location,
sir. Yes, sir.
and told them where to look. So it may well be. People think, oh, Keith, you described the psychic dimensions of this as if the physical isn't real. It's physical and it's psychic. I always respond in a way that just confounds our worldview, because the Western model, as you know, has a firm divide between the mental and the physical.
Yes.
Cannot experience your thoughts. It's not a possibility, except I can. I often say the UFO phenomenon, the near-death phenomenon, and psychic phenomena didn't get the memo. And if they got the memo, they filed it where Michael Scott on The Office would file it in the wastebasket.
You're funny.
So anyway, they didn't get the memo, and so their reality surpasses what our maps say is allowed, and that's the great irony of all of this. That interestingly, I was talking with Dean Radin, the researcher at the Institute of Noetic Sciences in Northern California, has done some of the best research
Yeah, I've
on
heard of them.
normal, and he was telling me that I'm trying to think of who one of the materialist scientists who we come to know well said, at this point, Dean, you've actually convinced me that your laboratory research is so legitimate, so well. You have such double blind, triple blind, quadruple blind. You do anyway. I'm convinced you're getting a signal. You've got me. I'm crossed over now. I think telepathy and clairvoyance exist. But then there was a pause, and Dean said, "And will you be joining me? We're doing a road trip together and talking about." He said, I don't know the mechanism. I don't know how it could be real. And of course, mechanism is what a mechanist looks for. The mechanism
Sure
needs a mechanism. Maybe mind to mind communication is part of the foundation of reality as much as gravity.
Yes.
So it's not how does it happen? So a materialist says, well, brains can't communicate with other brains. Arguably, that's true. That's not how it does happen. It's mind to mind. So the separation of brain is not, maybe the evidence would point to there being a larger transpersonal, unbounded, that reality is consciousness. And what seems like reality, the hard edge stuff, is the perceptual edge where individual consciousness meets mind at large. There's a lot still to be understood. But in any case, this researcher told Dean, I don't know what the mechanism is. Until I figure out the mechanism, I don't want to go public with this. So anyway, it happens. We don't know how it happens. We know that it happens. And that's increasingly what we're learning about the UFO phenomenon.
Now, with your experience on the roof, with that expansive experience, then you had your near-death experience, which was also super expansive. Do you feel like you came back with any extra clairs or any extra abilities? Do you feel like you have any psychicness, or do you feel like you have the ability to perceive or remote view even?
I don't have remote viewing. I have not actually tried the protocols.
Okay.
But I found in the aftermath of my experience in Hawaii, especially, an enhanced intuition.
Okay.
And I don't make any, I'm not setting up a business as a psychic or anything like that. I don't make any claims because I believe it is a human trait.
Yeah.
I do know also that my letting go or just being relieved of fear of death had led me, when my mother died some years ago, she was in hospice. So she decided that she would make her death part of her life. She didn't quite put it that way, but she had friends who had died at hospice and she wanted to die that way as well. So I played a rather significant role of all my brothers, who was open to being with her in times when she wasn't really at her best. She was dying, right? And there's a lot.
Yeah.
Does that ever separate the men from the boys in terms of it brings up all the issues we have. If you've got unresolved issues with death, you'll find them when you hang out with a dying person, especially. So in any case, when I was with my mother in her room at the hospice, on the last day of her life, there was a time when she smiled. I had been talking to her and telling her things like, you know, Mom, referring to my brothers and me, we're actually all okay. Believe it or not, your sons, we're all moving on. You know, we're all okay. This is your. And so I was giving her all the permission she needed. When I would get up, for example, to go to the bathroom, take a break during her final day and days, I did so knowing that she might very well choose to die while I wasn't there, because many times the dying are shy. They don't want to be seen. They know they're going through it. Well, so I saw her smile, and I heard in the room, and I felt in the room presence that I not later discovered, and as I studied the phenomenon, deathbed visitation is a very common thing. My mother was in a coma, so I couldn't ask her what she was experiencing, but I felt presence. I felt she was being that her companions, probably her relatives, her friends, with whom she was connected, were helping her make her transition.
Most
And
definitely.
Yeah.
completely supported it, and I felt the presence fill the room. And I think it's probably because I had an openness to it. I think my defenses were minimal. So I think the line between death and life is very, very open. It's a membrane. It's not a.
It's
a
very
very
funny that
thin
you
line.
said that. This is another synchronicity to the show I was watching, Unsolved Mysteries, yesterday, because I watched an episode about the tsunami in Japan, and how after all those thousands of people all passed away at the same time, there was a large reporting of hauntings, people seeing ghosts, people seeing bodies, people seeing apparitions, because they all died together, right, in that same like one big traumatic thing. But the monk that was talking about how he counseled the people described the difference between life and death like one of those really thin Japanese doors that has the paper, to where like the paper's there creating a barrier, but if light is behind it, you could still see the light shining through, you could still see silhouettes. And he compared the difference between life and death as that thin little Japanese door.
The veil.
It's a tiny thin membrane.
There's a name for it. I think it's shoji, but I don't want to sound incorrect if that's not right.
Yeah, death is actually, I guess you could say, rebirth, basically.
Well, interestingly, there is, there's some very good, Dr. Ian Stevenson of the University of Virginia did some very good research about children's memories of past lives. And what he found is the children who had the best memories of past lives, including memories of being shot through a part of their body that in this life has a birthmark.
Oh my.
Boom.
We've heard that.
Okay, so what he was saying was trauma, that the presence of the impact of trauma is very great in remembering those deaths. What goes on in the near-death experience? You almost die. It doesn't get much more traumatic. So the past life memories that suggest reincarnation, the near-death experience, and the sense of trauma nobody seeks out a near-death experience. The resistance, I've often said I'm still in many ways still sitting with the stages of my own near-death experience, specifically around the fact that I went from my efforts to survive, the efforts I made to survive when I was totally identified as Keith, the swimmer, the energy I devoted to surviving against those waves. And then the instant that came when I was not in my body, I was seeing my body, and I was identified, the sense of I that had been identified with Keith as a separate self was suddenly the ground of consciousness itself. That I was now part of the larger I. And the body was part of a larger body of being. So I was suddenly that vastness. Then, without specifically getting an instruction, you must go back. Your time has not come. I nevertheless did come back into my body, and suddenly was once again seeing through these two eyes as Keith again. So what it has taught me is there's a psychic mobility. Consciousness has a mobility. It can take form. It goes. So Consciousness is not produced by the brain. There is no evidence in any case that it is. It's not generated by the brain. It's more that the brain is permissive.
Like a receiver, a filter of some sort, right?
Transmitter. So it's permissive. It's a permissive organ. Sure, it's engaged. If you tap out one part of the brain, you'll change your ability to perceive color. So consciousness in day-to-day embodied life does use the brain. I'm not disputing
Like a
the
filter.
magnificence. But in terms of non-local, larger awareness, this body, this consciousness that is parked in this body now and seems so desperately identified with this body is not. I believe, here's what I believe. I can only tell you, I intuit it very deeply. The process by which I left the body is that day in Hawaii is the same process which I will leave the body when it is finally the departure. And in fact, the Tibetans, as you know, Tibetan Buddhism, the Tibetan Book of the Dead is a guidebook on how to manage that transition. There are practices that Tibetan Buddhists do in order to get good at that the transition in moving through what are called the bardos with vast light, vast sounds, noise, cacophony. And that's why the Tibetan Buddhists often have all these noise
gongs and stuff, right?
Gongs and and the
Vibration.
the vibrational stuff. It is so they have more than any, I should say, not more than any other, but certainly Tibetan Buddhism has developed the technology of travel from this life to another. I think it's very likely that to practice dying, as even Plato said, even Western, practice dying, get good at it. Because the idea is that if you are terrified in that transition as you go through the bardos, you'll probably cling to all kinds of gross phenomena and you'll come back pretty much as whatever you were. Or maybe, again, I'm not even advocating a pure past life hypothesis, because I saw what appeared to be dead relatives of mine. So there could be multiple scenarios that go on. Is the seeming heaven phenomenon of an afterlife, is that a virtual reality? Is that a place where some part of us gets parked? But then do we also have the opportunity? Perhaps it's choice. Perhaps it's expectation. Perhaps there's so much freedom that nature itself is constrained by has fewer constraints. Nature has more degrees of freedom than our maps tell us. So that's why I'm drawn to do death in the next book.
Okay.
That journey really interests me. I think I could explore some things that haven't been.
So is that an upcoming project that you have, a new book about near-death experience? Did we just get a little
No, it's not something I've just now decided. It'll include the near-death experience. It'll include seances, materializations, a whole range of deathbed visitation, anecdotal. Oftentimes the debunker or skeptic, these are just anecdotes. These are anecdotal reports.
What about the childhood past life remembrances? Are you going to put that in there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The past life stuff is definitely part of it.
Yeah.
So an anecdote. So, but it's a dismissive term when it's used that way. They're just anecdotes. Well, Galileo's insights started with anecdotes. He had a story that the church told him to stop telling. Revolving around the sun. So anecdotes are the beginning. Charles Darwin he was a British naturalist. He didn't even call himself a scientist, but he would go out on these excursions. He had the ability to do so, the means. So he went to the Galapagos Islands and collected fossils. And he began to collect all kinds of fossils and bones and put together, the animals in this region are different from the ones there. It led to the theory of evolution. So follow the evidence wherever it leads.
Yeah.
And I think that, you and even Allie and Justin and I are changing the maps. The maps are getting updated, I think.
Yeah, these conversations are updating that, right?
I think part of it, and a big part of what I develop in the book, I use Joseph Campbell's model of the hero's journey, the 3 stages of initiation. I mean, here's what I describe in the book. Stage 1 of the hero's journey is a separation. You're separated from your normal reality. That was the case for me at 14 on the roof. It was my near-death experience, the psychic experience, the knowing that a telephone call, you're thinking of an old friend for 2 days from high school. Whatever happened to Jim? Pick up the phone. Right? He said, Keith, it's Jim from high school.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I've been thinking about you. Where are you? I got your number from Elton. Whatever. Well, that's merely an anecdote. It's a mere coincidence in the materialist worldview. Well,
Hmm.
put everything back in the box. There's nothing to see here, people. Go back to your little lives. Well, people have these experiences. So we get separated. The world is a little more interesting. It's bigger than I thought. So there's
Right.
this off. I call them, and this isn't my own phrase, but I refer to UFO experiences as a kind of spiritual emergency. They
Oh,
very often, Christina Groff came up with that phrase. She formed an organization called the Spiritual Emergency Network for people who suddenly find they have Kundalini experiences, they
Yeah.
have energy phenomena, they have past life memories. Those are generally involve real existential crisis,
ontological shock, right?
ontological shock, to use
Mm-hmm.
that term John Mack had popularized. So there's the first stage in the rite of passage to a larger reality. It's separation from your previous worldview. Then there's this vast in between, betwixt and between. You're no longer sure of the worldview you had before, but you're not quite who you will be. You know that. So there's in the hero's journey, in the mythologies of the world, the traveler goes through all kinds of ordeals, finds allies, meets adversaries, has to find the Grail. The Grail legends are part of a spiritual search, and then finally the the experience culminates. In, to use a fancy term in anthropology, this
Hmm.
stage of aggregation. It
Okay.
aggregates. It all comes together. It's a culmination. You return in the mythology of the world. You come back to the tribe with like Buddha, having gone out in search, comes back to the community with insight about Buddha nature that
Mm.
we
Mm.
you can be awake to. He said he came up with an insight that was generalizable to everybody else. So you come back from a so in my own, frankly, I don't think of it in grandiose terms, but I think of my own work as I have a calling to explore these realms. It's my mission. It's my sense of I know I can't not do this.
Right. Right.
Gotcha.
Well, thank you for your service in this field. It's much appreciated.
Yeah, for
Well,
sure.
Absolutely.
and we're all on our own journeys, and the debunker plays a role. By the way, I make a distinction between a debunker and a true skeptic. Skepticism
Me
has its
too.
place. You've got to be discriminating, and the religious traditions often speak of discrimination among spirits. Not every spirit, it might be real, but a spirit might be a liar. The spiritual, there are all kinds of trickster phenomena in the psychic realms.
Yeah.
They don't
Mhm.
necessarily
Definitely.
mean you ill, but you don't necessarily want to sell your stock portfolio based on your latest psychic experience. They might have a laugh at your expense, but nevertheless, those spirits, that's trickster as they are real phenomena. They're part of a larger math. So yeah, we are. So the distinction between debunker, the debunker is a skeptic on steroids. I call it toxic skepticism. It's the
Okay.
Yeah.
that didn't happen because we know that doesn't happen.
They come in
There-
with their mind already made up, right?
It's like, when you think of the old Oprah episodes, if she would do an episode on the near-death experience, and she did a lot of good episodes in her heyday. The talk show, the afternoon talk shows, with Sally
Yeah.
Jessy and Ellen DeGeneres.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you do. So they would bring on someone who had a near-death experience. The first 15 minutes is that they tell their experience. The second 15 minutes of the show, hour-long show, is the friendly researcher who says, yes, we've studied these. These near-death experiences appear to be real. Then near the end, they bring out this skeptical, supposedly neutral skeptic, but they're very often debunkers.
Hmm.
They will cast character assassination charges. This witness is making money. They go to UFO conferences and get paid, and all these kinds of. So the debunker is not a real scientist.
No.
It's not genuine science. It doesn't serve. But true skepticism does. Question your assumptions, question your beliefs. Don't get caught in believing things. Use the. I often say the more I learn about these realms, the more ignorant I become. In this sense, I discover a new fact. For example, when I discovered that the UFO phenomenon has a paranormal dimension, then
Yep.
I had to look at paranormal and say, okay, I've got 5 or 10 new questions that I didn't have before. And I
Yes.
don't. So now I'm technically more ignorant, but ignorant in the sense, okay, I have less certainty, but I have more leads. So
Mm-hmm.
new leads to new ignorance. Right.
I like the way you perceive that and wrap that up, because like I've explained it and described the same thing where like I'll go down a rabbit hole seeking like one piece of information, but come back out with like 30 more questions that I didn't even know to think of because I didn't go down that rabbit hole yet. So it's like you come out asking more questions than you go in getting answers. But I like the way that you've reframed it, that it's like you're just gaining a wider perspective. That's really cool.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, thank you.
absolutely. All right, so I have a question that I normally like to ask of all of our guests. So, what is your greatest hope for the future of humanity?
Hmm. I I would hope that we can get beyond our tribalism, which is so rampant now in our politics, especially. The internet has made, supposedly it was supposed to make us all more in touch with the global voice, the global perspective,
Yeah,
but it has globalized our tribalism. So, and the division between science and religion is equally toxic. So, I like to believe that these kinds of experiences that are unitive ultimately have the potential to bring us together. I think it was H.G. Wells, the science fiction writer, who said we're always in a race between education and catastrophe.
Mm.
yeah,
Go for education, let's go for learning. And I often stress the teaching. I did not know the Zen teacher Suzuki Roshi, but he had a famous book called Beginner's Mind. And he famously said, in the beginner's mind are many possibilities. In the expert's mind are few. So
It's
the
true though.
irony, when you're a beginner and you have beginner's mind, you have the openness to ask questions, seek new information. Very often, if you're an expert, by which I mean if you see yourself as an expert, then you're a know-it-all. There's not many possibilities to know-it-all because they know everything.
Right.
So be a beginner, always be a beginner. And that's why people say, have you learned anything about this phenomenon that keeps you awake at night? And I think they generally mean, if I've been introduced to any scenario, has anybody from the intelligence agencies told me that they know the real thing and we're screwed? No. No one has told me that with any certainty. And I just don't orient myself to it that way. Um, ask questions, be curious, and have a balanced life. If you're into this kind of stuff, eat well, get plenty of sleep, get exercise, uh, cultivate your relationships. If there's discord in the family, ask what part of it do you contribute to,
Ooh, shadow work.
and try to make peace in your family. Don't be codependent either. If you've got somebody in the family who, with these kinds of experiences, very often they lead to deep metaphysical divisions, my gosh, in the current political battles. Um, we all know, we all have stories about the political stuff. That if you support this presidential candidate, you're not welcome. You
Mm.
know, so this is, and it can lead to real deep division. So if you can heal those, if you can withdraw your contribution to the discord, and just I have a brother. I'll just share this. I have a brother um, who's concluded that my politics must. He doesn't really know my politics, but he knows I don't share his.
Okay.
And so his set of assumptions he has about how far out I must be in the other direction. And we don't see each other often. I finally came to realize he's got a case of mistaken identity. He's got me confused with somebody that I'm not. So I
yeah,
stopped straightening him out. I said, no, if he wants to ask me straightforward questions about my views, what I actually espouse, which trust me, I don't have any deep political secrets, but I have political views, but I'm not a radical. I don't live in an underground bunker. I'm not a
right.
crazy on either side. But I kind of realized, his views about who I probably am, he's got a story about me that's not accurate.
Yeah, he's painted a picture of you that's not who you really are, right?
And that lives for him. But
Hmm.
so anyway, we're in touch. We're in good contact. And
I was only laughing really hard because I feel like I can relate to that. But anyway,
I can totally relate as well.
Absolutely.
I feel like we all can actually.
Yeah.
it's also true with religious stuff. I mean, you have families, if someone gets into Buddhism or Hinduism or quote New Age stuff, and if you have a Bible believing relative, it can seem really that's demonic stuff.
Oh
So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
okay, yeah.
I
Can you
feel
do
like you
us?
just described me. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Can you do our audience a favor and tell them where they can find you?
Sure, they can find me on Twitter, or now it's called X, which is Keith Thompson, P and Thompson, number one, Keith Thompson 1. I don't do a lot there, but I post stuff about UFOs there since the book is
Hmm.
just out. And I also have a website called thompsonatlarge.com.
Okay.
Thompson and you can email me there. I have the books are available. The book is available, I should say, in different formats: a print book, an ebook, and also now the audiobook is out. I just
Oh,
yeah, I narrated it myself. Went into the studio, and so a lot of people are into audiobooks these days.
okay.
Sure.
The main way to listen to books. So it's available in all those formats, and at
Excellent.
Amazon, Barnes and Noble as well.
Is there any way to get a signed copy?
People can write me by email. I
Okay.
suppose they can send me a copy. I've also thought of, I haven't thought this through, but I'll talk it out loud and see if I'm committing. You know, those little plates you can get to put in front of a book, a little, um, you can sign the plate and then take the adhesive off and put it on the inside of the cover.
Ah,
Someone were to tell me they wanted me to sign it, I could write one of those. I don't have any of those yet, but, or I
okay.
could, or someone could send me a book, but no, there aren't signed copies that are easily available.
Okay.
Is there any last bits of advice for our audience you would like them to know about? Any last things you'd like to share that you didn't get a chance to say yet?
I would just say people ask me if I had a UFO experience, Keith, or a near-death experience, or psychic, some kind of big spiritual emergency. Um, should I tell anybody? Should I tell someone? And the answer, yes, you should. But what I mean by that is you don't hold a news conference, don't tell the whole world, and don't necessarily plan to write a book unless a first-person book about a spiritual emergency can be very tough. Whitley Strieber famously wrote the book called Communion about his own abduction experience in the 80s. And it has been a rough ride for him to be the abduction guy. I
Yeah.
don't think he regrets having done it because he's lived his life out loud and with real integrity, asking questions about what happened to him in those days. But I do say, tell it to somebody you trust. Maybe it's a religious counselor or pastor,
Yeah.
therapeutic psychology counselor, or a good friend, maybe a member of the family that you can say, can I trust you to can I tell you what happened to me when I was driving home? Don't let it build inside yourself, unburden yourself, but don't necessarily tell the whole world.
Love that. That is
Great
solid,
advice.
solid advice. Thank you so
And by the
much.
way, I will share. I will share. I learned that from the near-death experience. From coming ashore, and I saw what looks I was getting from them when I told them I had died and come back. There's a poem by the German poet Goethe, and there's a line that goes like this. I have it in the book. It has to do with when you tell your deepest truth. Okay, so it goes
Okay.
like this: tell a wise person, or else keep silent, because the mass man will mock it right away. So on these experiences that are your deepest truth, tell it to another wise person. Tell it to someone who would understand. Someone who also go to a support group. Tell it to a wise person, another person in the know, or else keep silent because the masses will mock it right away. You'll get a lot of pushback, a lot of negativity. I didn't get a lot of that. By the way, one of the most interesting experiences for me, not only did I find out about what the near-death experience is really about in the aftermath of my own experience, but I got phone calls from all my friends in Hawaii, or and they said, Keith, there's a thing called the near-death experience, and what you were describing that day was really real. There's a book called Life After Life. There's a guy named Kenneth Ring. I said, I already know all this. Well, thank you. I said, you guys didn't believe me. So it became a big part of our adventure, our friendship. And my friend Mary, who stood there on the beach assuming that I was dying and probably had already died, why didn't he listen?
Yeah.
I will simply say this. I won't try to recount it, but the closing of the book contains an anecdote about my last memories of Mary, because she called me when she was dying. She had a health disorder, and she asked me if I knew. Uh, and I said, I hear you're sick. She goes, yeah, I am. How sick? She said, I'm dying. We had a great friendship. I said, well, how's that going? She said, oh, you know me. I'm always thorough. I do it all out. So we laughed. She said, I'm wondering if you could come. So I'll just leave it there. I go see her in we have a final conversation. We had been talking for years about the meaning of life, the meaning of death, that this life opens to other life. So I really had the honor of being with her in the final transition where I could sort of say my final words to her about what she might be looking forward to. So I'll just leave that there. That's the literal closing chapter of the book.
And I think that's kind of funny
I
that
wanna read it.
you were both there for each other when you died. Only,
Yeah.
Exactly.
you know, what a cool friendship.
Yeah, it really was. And I did not set out to write this book with those experiences intended.
Understood.
And I got instructions as I was writing this book from my own larger sense of intelligence.
From your higher self, you mean? Okay.
I call it the daimon. It's a Greek term. Socrates had his daimon, who he consulted with, if you will. The daimon is it's a Greek term for guide, companion, larger known. A calling. Your true calling is the daimon. The idea is ancient Platonic philosophers. We come into this life with with the memories wiped clean. We come in with amnesia as if this is our first rodeo.
Yeah.
And we think we're abandoned into the universe, but there's a part of us that we don't know about. I define the daimon as part of who you are that you don't think of as being who you are. So I had, in writing this book, some conversations. I hold it lightly when I say I spoke with my daimon, but I said, should I bring my personal story in? And the answer that I got was, do you want to tell the truth? Do you want to write the truest book possible? And it wasn't a question that was designed for me to say, well, let me think about that. It was like, the question is the answer. Yes, I want to tell the truth. And I then, following many of the people in the UFO book that I was finishing, I told my story just as I was telling their story, how they resolved their experience. I described how my own personal spiritual, metaphysical, philosophical, existential experiences informed my approach. So I not only have no regret, it made it a deeper book by bringing my own experience.
That. And I was going to say, I hope that our audience goes and checks it out.
Go ahead.
I apologize. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I'm a journalist for whom the data is their own experience as well.
Understood. Very, very cool. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. I'm really excited for our audience to get a chance to take a gander at this conversation. I really advise everybody to go check out the UFO Paradox. You can get it on Amazon and a bunch of other places, so make sure to check that out. But while you're still here with us, please do us a favor and smash that like button, click subscribe, ring our little notification bell, drop a lovely comment down below, and share this video with your family and friends to help us spread the good word. Much love, peace, and namaste.